Peering behind the glass and crossing into uncharted territory, we aim to bring you closer to the absolute truth. Step into the past to witness the exact moments that shattered expectations.
You stole those shoes, right?
No, sir, I didn't steal anything. I bought them. I got the receipt right here.
Those cost over $5 grand. There's no way someone like you
I
can
saved
afford
up, okay?
that.
I paid for them.
Yeah, right. Kids your age dressed like this? No chance. You're under arrest. Hands behind your...
Courtney Blake, a white woman in her late 40s, saw an 18-year-old black teenager named Khalil Garner standing at a bus stop holding a shopping bag from an upscale sneaker store. And because she had just been in that same store and couldn't afford the $5,000 sneakers she wanted to buy for her own son, she immediately assumed that a black teenager couldn't possibly have purchased them legitimately and called 911 to report a robbery in progress. And when Officer Sean Pierce arrived and saw Khalil, he didn't ask for a receipt or verify the purchase. He immediately accused Khalil of stealing the shoes, and when Khalil tried to show his receipt and explain he had saved for months with his parents' support, Pierce told him to shut up and arrested him while Courtney smirked in the background. But what Courtney Blake and Officer Sean Pierce didn't know and were going to find out was that the store employee who sold Khalil the shoes would witness the arrest, run out to intervene, confirm the purchase was legitimate, and tell Pierce that his boss, a wealthy black business owner with a reputation for destroying racist cops, would be hearing about this, forcing Pierce to release Khalil. But not before the damage had been done and the lawsuit that would cost Courtney $220,000 and Pierce's career had already begun. Before we go further, what city or country are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. We love seeing where you're tuning in from. And if you believe a black teenager should be able to buy sneakers without being accused of theft, like this video and subscribe. Khalil Garner had been waiting for this day for 8 months, and when he finally walked through the glass doors of Soul Elite Boutique on a Saturday afternoon, he felt like every hour he had spent working at his part-time job stocking shelves at a grocery store had been worth it. He was 18 years old as of 3 days ago, and the sneakers he was about to buy were more than just shoes. They were proof that hard work paid off, that saving money and staying disciplined could get you something you really wanted, and that keeping his end of the deal he had made with his parents meant they would keep theirs. The deal had been simple. Khalil wanted a pair of limited edition sneakers that cost $5,000. An amount that would have been impossible for him to afford on his own even after 8 months of saving every dollar he could from his paychecks. But his parents had told him that if he maintained a B average or higher for his senior year of high school and worked consistently without quitting his job, they would contribute the rest of the money he needed to buy the sneakers for his 18th birthday. Khalil had done exactly that. He had worked weekends and evenings after school, had saved over $2,800 on his own, and had finished his senior year with a 3.4 GPA. His parents had been proud, and they had kept their promise. Soul Elite Boutique was not the kind of store where Khalil usually shopped. It was located in an upscale shopping district where the storefronts had floor-to-ceiling windows and the mannequins wore clothes that cost more than most people's monthly rent. The boutique specialized in luxury sneakers, limited edition releases, and collaborations with designers and athletes that made each pair of shoes feel less like footwear and more like collectible art. Khalil had been researching this particular pair of sneakers for months, checking release dates and availability, and when he found out that Soul Elite had them in stock in his size, he had called ahead to make sure they would hold them for him. When Khalil walked into the store that afternoon, he was dressed in a plain black t-shirt, dark blue jeans, and a pair of worn sneakers that had seen better days. He carried a backpack over one shoulder, and his phone was in his hand because he had been texting his parents to let them know he was about to make the purchase. He looked like a typical teenager, and to anyone paying attention, he looked excited. The store employee who greeted him was a white man in his early 30s named Ryan Mitchell. And Ryan had been working at Soul Elite for 3 years. He had seen all kinds of customers walk through the door, from celebrities buying entire collections to teenagers saving up for a single pair, and he treated every customer with the same level of professionalism and respect. When Khalil told him which sneakers he was there to buy, Ryan smiled and told him he had made a great choice. Ryan brought out the box, opened it carefully, and let Khalil try on the sneakers. They were everything Khalil had hoped they would be. The fit was perfect. The design was exactly what he had seen in the photos online. The quality was undeniable. Khalil stood up and walked around the store in them, checking how they felt. And when he looked at Ryan and said, "I'll take them," Ryan could see how much this moment meant to him. The transaction took less than 10 minutes. Khalil paid using a combination of the cash he had saved and a debit card linked to the account where his parents had deposited their contribution. Ryan processed the payment, printed the receipt, placed the sneakers back in their box, wrapped the box in tissue paper, and put everything into a branded Soul Elite shopping bag with handles. He handed Khalil the bag along with the receipt, shook his hand, and told him to enjoy his birthday gift. Khalil walked out of the store holding the shopping bag in one hand and his phone in the other, and the smile on his face was the kind of smile that came from achieving something you had worked hard for. He walked to the bus stop directly outside the boutique, sat down on the bench, and sent a text to his parents with a photo of the shopping bag and the caption, "Got them, thank you." What Khalil didn't see was the woman sitting on the same bench about 6 feet away from him, staring at the shopping bag in his hand with an expression that was equal parts jealousy and suspicion. Courtney Blake had been sitting at that bus stop for the past 20 minutes, and she had been in a bad mood for most of that time. She had walked into Seoul Elite Boutique earlier that afternoon with the intention of buying a pair of sneakers for her 16-year-old son's birthday, which was coming up in 2 weeks. She had looked at several options, had found a pair that her son would have loved, and then she had looked at the price tag and felt her stomach drop. The sneakers cost $4,200, and that was more than she could afford. She had tried to justify the purchase, had considered putting it on a credit card, but ultimately she had walked out of the store empty-handed and frustrated. Now she was sitting at the bus stop waiting for her ride home, and she looked over and saw a black teenager holding a shopping bag from the same store she had just left. The bag was unmistakable. The logo was printed across the front in bold letters, and Courtney's mind immediately started making calculations that had nothing to do with logic and everything to do with bias. She looked at Khalil's clothes. She looked at his worn sneakers. She looked at his backpack. And she thought to herself, there is no way he bought those. No way a kid like that could afford anything from that store. He must have stolen them. Or he scammed the employees somehow. Or he used stolen money. Because in Courtney's mind, shaped by years of assumptions and prejudice, there was simply no scenario in which a black teenager could legitimately walk out of a luxury boutique with an expensive purchase. Courtney didn't consider that Khalil might have saved for months. She didn't consider that his parents might have helped him. She didn't consider that he might have worked for the money. She just saw what she wanted to see, and what she saw confirmed every stereotype she had ever believed. She pulled out her phone, moved slightly to the side so Khalil wouldn't notice, and dialed 911. The dispatcher answered. 911, what's your emergency? Courtney's voice came out urgent and breathless. I'm witnessing a robbery. There's a black boy at the bus stop outside Seoul Elite Boutique on Westwood Avenue. He just walked out of the store with stolen merchandise, expensive sneakers. You need to come fast before the bus arrives and he gets away. The dispatcher asked, did you see him steal the items? Courtney hesitated for just a second, then said, I know he stole them. There's no way he could afford them. He's wearing old clothes. He looks like he's broke. Just send someone now before he leaves. The call was logged and dispatched to the nearest patrol unit. Officer Sean Pearson, who was 2 blocks away, received the call and turned on his lights. Officer Sean Pierce was 41 years old with 12 years on the force, and over those 12 years he had built a reputation that his supervisors had documented but never seriously addressed. Pierce had been the subject of 5 formal complaints from Black and Latino residents, all of them describing the same pattern: stops without probable cause, aggressive questioning, assumptions of guilt based on appearance, and refusal to listen to explanations. All 5 complaints had been investigated and dismissed with verbal warnings. The pattern was clear, written into his personnel file, but no one had ever done anything to stop it. Pierce pulled up to the bus stop less than 5 minutes after the call, and the first thing he saw was Khalil sitting on the bench, holding a shopping bag. Pierce got out of his cruiser, and his hand moved instinctively to rest on his service weapon as he walked toward Khalil with the kind of aggressive confidence that came from years of treating people like suspects before asking questions. Hey, Pierce said, his voice loud and sharp enough to make Khalil look up from his phone. How did you get those expensive sneakers? I'm not sure even I could afford those. How does a lowlife like you have them? Khalil's confusion was immediate. He looked at the officer, then at the shopping bag, then back at the officer. Excuse me? What are you talking about? Pierce stepped closer, his tone getting sharper. I asked you a question, boy. Where did you steal those sneakers from? Khalil stood up from the bench, his heart starting to pound. I didn't steal anything, I just bought them. I have the receipt right here. Pierce cut him off. That's a lie. There's no way you could afford those sneakers. From behind Pierce, Courtney Blake's voice rang out loud enough for everyone at the bus stop to hear. Those sneakers cost over $5,000. How can a small boy like him afford that? He must have stolen them or scammed the store somehow. Or even worse, stole the money from someone. That's what his kind normally does. Pierce turned to look at Courtney, and instead of questioning her assumptions, he nodded, like she had just confirmed exactly what he was thinking. He turned back to Khalil. Khalil's voice got firmer. I have my receipt. I paid in full. I didn't steal any money. I've been saving for months, and my parents supported me. If you don't believe me, you can go into the store and confirm it. I know my rights. This is racial profiling. Pierce's expression hardened. Shut up. You must think I'm a fool. You've been saving for a $5,000 pair of sneakers? He looked Khalil up and down, taking in his worn clothes and old shoes, and his voice dripped with condescension. And your parents actually gave you money for it? Yeah, right. Khalil tried again. I'm telling you the truth. I have proof. Just let me show you. Pierce pulled out his handcuffs. There's no need to check any of that. Of course you have receipts, but I know you acquired those sneakers illegally one way or another. We'll be finding that out at the station. You're under arrest. Khalil's voice rose. You can't arrest me. I didn't do anything wrong. Pierce grabbed Khalil's arm and spun him around roughly, forcing his hands behind his back. Khalil tried to pull away, but Pierce twisted his arms and snapped the handcuffs onto his wrists with enough force to leave marks. The shopping bag fell to the ground, and Pierce kicked it aside. By now, a crowd had gathered. People walking past had stopped to watch. Other passengers waiting at the bus stop were recording on their phones. And the whispers started spreading through the crowd, loud enough for everyone to hear. He stole those sneakers. I heard they cost thousands of dollars. Can't believe he thought he'd get away with it. They finally caught him. Courtney Blake stood off to the side with her arms crossed and a smirk on her face, looking satisfied with herself like she had just done something heroic. And inside Solilite Boutique, Ryan Mitchell was finishing his shift and getting ready to leave for the day when he heard the commotion outside and the voices from the crowd saying that a black boy was getting arrested for stealing expensive sneakers. Ryan walked to the window and looked out, and his stomach dropped when he saw Khalil standing in handcuffs. Ryan Mitchell grabbed his jacket and ran out of the store without even clocking out, pushing through the glass doors and sprinting toward the bus stop where Officer Sean Pierce was holding Khalil Garner in handcuffs. Ryan had sold Khalil those sneakers less than 20 minutes ago, had processed the payment himself, had watched Khalil's face light up when the transaction went through, and now he was watching that same kid being treated like a criminal for a purchase that was completely legitimate. Ryan ran straight up to Pierce, his voice loud enough to cut through the murmur of the crowd. What the hell do you think you're doing? That boy didn't steal anything. He has his receipt. Did you even check that? Or are you arresting him just because he's black? Pierce turned to look at Ryan and his expression shifted from authoritative to irritated. Mind your business. This is police business. If you don't step back right now, you'll be interfering with an official investigation, and that's a crime. Ryan didn't step back. Instead, he took another step forward and pointed at Khalil. It is my business. I work in that store right there. I was the one who sold him those shoes less than 20 minutes ago. Everything checked out. He paid in full. He has a receipt. He shouldn't be getting arrested for stealing when he obviously didn't. Ryan pulled out his phone and started recording, holding it up so the camera was pointed directly at Pierce. You have no legal reason to arrest him. I've confirmed as an employee of the store that he didn't steal those shoes. He paid for them, in full. So whatever other suspicious reason you have is not enough to arrest him. Pierce's face flushed red and his jaw tightened. He took a step toward Ryan, leaving Khalil standing on the sidewalk still in handcuffs, and his voice got louder and more aggressive. I won't repeat myself again. Leave here now, or you'll be getting arrested as well. Pierce grabbed Ryan by the collar of his shirt and pulled him close enough that their faces were only inches apart. Then he reached out with his other hand, snatched Ryan's phone out of his grip, and stopped the recording. He tapped the screen a few times, deleted the video, and shoved the phone back into Ryan's chest hard enough to make him stumble backward. Ryan caught his balance and looked Pierce directly in the eye, and his voice came out calm but deadly serious. Seems like you don't know who our store owner is. Pierce's grip on Ryan's collar loosened slightly, but his expression stayed aggressive. I don't care who your boss is. This doesn't concern him. Ryan's voice stayed steady. His name is David Coleman. Very wealthy, very respected. A black man who has spent years fighting for black lives, especially when it comes to his businesses. He doesn't stand for racism. He's taken down a lot of racist cops over the years, big cases, expensive lawsuits. And if you dare arrest this boy for something he didn't do, you'll be hearing from him. Pierce's face went pale. He knew the name David Coleman. Everyone in the department knew that name. Coleman had sued the police department twice in the past 5 years, and both times the cases had resulted in officers being fired and the city paying out six-figure settlements. Coleman owned multiple businesses across the city, and he had a reputation for using his money and influence to hold law enforcement accountable when they crossed the line. Pierce let go of Ryan's collar and took a step back. His voice lost some of its aggression, but he tried to maintain control. I didn't know this was his store." Ryan's expression didn't soften. "Well, now you do. And if you think deleting that video is going to help you, you're wrong. The store has security cameras that recorded everything, every word you said, every move you made, and I'm going to make sure Mr. Coleman sees all of it." Pierce looked at Khalil, then at Ryan, then at the crowd of people still recording on their phones. He realized that he had just made a mistake that was going to cost him more than he could afford. He pulled out his keys, walked over to Khalil, and unlocked the handcuffs without saying a word. Khalil brought his arms forward and rubbed his wrists where the metal had dug into his skin. His hands were shaking and his voice came out quiet and strained. "You had no right to do that to me." Pierce didn't respond. He didn't apologize. He just muttered something about a misunderstanding and misinformation pointed vaguely in Courtney Blake's direction like this was all her fault, and then got back into his patrol car and drove away as fast as he could without turning on his lights. Courtney, who had been standing off to the side watching everything unfold, realized that the attention was now shifting toward her. A few people in the crowd were looking at her and whispering. One woman said loud enough for everyone to hear, "She's the one who called the cops on him. She's the one who lied." Courtney's face turned red. She opened her mouth like she was going to say something to defend herself, but nothing came out that would make the situation better. She turned and walked quickly away from the bus stop, pulling out her phone and pretending she had somewhere important to be. Ryan walked over to Khalil and put a hand on his shoulder. "Are you okay?" Khalil nodded, but his eyes were wet and he was blinking fast to keep from crying. "I didn't do anything wrong. I just bought the shoes. That's all I did." Ryan's voice was gentle but firm. "I know. And I'm going to make sure everyone else knows too. What's your name?" "Khalil Garner." "Khalil, I need your phone number and your parents' contact information. I'm going to call my boss right now and tell him what happened. And I promise you, this isn't over. That officer and that woman are going to face consequences for what they just did to you." Khalil gave Ryan his information, picked up the shopping bag, with his sneakers that had been kicked to the side during the arrest, and sat back down on the bench to wait for his bus. His hands were still shaking, and the excitement he had felt walking out of the store was gone, replaced by humiliation and anger. Ryan pulled out his phone and dialed David Coleman's personal number. Coleman answered on the second ring. "Ryan, what's going on?" "Mr. Coleman, we have a situation. A customer just got arrested outside the store for stealing sneakers that I sold him 20 minutes ago. The cop didn't check the receipt, didn't verify anything, just assumed the kid was a thief because he's black. I intervened, and the cop grabbed me and deleted my recording. But I told him you own the store, and he let the kid go. But the damage is done. The kid was humiliated in front of a crowd, and the woman who called the cops is the one who started all of this." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Coleman's voice came through, cold and controlled. "Get me the security footage. Get me the names of everyone involved. Get me witness statements. And get me that kid's contact information. I want to talk to him and his family personally." "Already done, sir. I'll send everything to you within the hour." "Good. And Ryan?" "Yes, sir?" "You did the right thing." David Coleman sat in pet in his office that evening, watching the security footage from Seoul Elite Boutique, and with every passing second his expression got harder. The footage showed Khalil Garner walking into the store, being greeted professionally by Ryan Mitchell, trying on the sneakers, making the payment with a combination of cash and a debit card, receiving his receipt, and walking out with his purchase in a branded shopping bag. Everything about the transaction was legitimate, documented, and legal. Then Coleman switched to the exterior security camera that covered the bus stop, and what he saw made his jaw tighten. The footage showed Officer Sean Pierce approaching Khalil aggressively, accusing him without asking questions, refusing to look at the receipt Khalil tried to show him, handcuffing him roughly and kicking the shopping bag aside like it was evidence of a crime. The audio captured every word Pierce had said, including calling Khalil a lowlife, and dismissing his explanation without any attempt to verify the truth. The footage also showed Courtney Blake sitting on the bench nearby, watching the entire arrest with a smirk on her face, and it captured the moment when she stood up and shouted that Khalil must have stolen the money because that's what his kind normally does. Coleman watched the video 3 times, and each time he felt the same combination of anger and determination. He had built his business empire specifically, so he would have the resources and influence to fight back against exactly this kind of injustice. He had been racially profiled himself when he was younger, had been followed in stores and questioned by police for doing nothing wrong. And he had promised himself that once he had money and power, he would use it to protect other black people from experiencing what he had endured. Coleman picked up his phone and called his attorney, Marcus Reed, who had handled multiple civil rights cases for him over the years. Marcus answered immediately. "David, I got the footage you sent. This is textbook racial profiling and false arrest." The officer didn't investigate, didn't verify the receipt, and made assumptions based solely on race. The woman who called 911 filed a false report with no evidence, and both of them caused significant emotional distress to a teenager who was doing nothing wrong. Coleman's voice was calm, but carried weight. "I want to file lawsuits against both of them, the officer and the woman. I want accountability, and I want this case to send a message that this kind of behavior has consequences." Marcus didn't hesitate. "I'll draft the paperwork tonight. We're going after Officer Sean Pierce for false arrest, excessive use of authority, and violation of civil rights. And we're going after Courtney Blake for filing a false police report, defamation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. I'm recommending we seek $220,000 in damages from Blake and push for Pierce's termination." Coleman nodded, even though Marcus couldn't see him. "Do it. And I want to meet with Khalil and his family personally. They need to know they have support." The next day, Coleman sat down with Khalil and his parents in his office. Khalil's mother was a school teacher and his father worked in construction, and both of them were still processing what had happened to their son. Khalil sat between them, quieter than he had been before the arrest, and Coleman could see the hurt in his eyes. Coleman spoke directly to Khalil. "What happened to you was wrong. You worked hard, you saved your money, you earned those sneakers, and you were treated like a criminal for it. That's not acceptable. And I'm going to make sure the people who did this to you face consequences." Khalil's voice came out small. "I just wanted to buy shoes for my birthday. That's all I was doing." Coleman leaned forward. "I know. And you had every right to do that without being harassed. My legal team is filing lawsuits against the officer and the woman who called the police. We're going to hold them accountable, and I want you to know that you're not alone in this." Coleman's legal team moved quickly. Within a week, the lawsuits were filed, and the police department opened an internal investigation into Officer Sean Pierce. What they found was damning. Pierce had been on the force for 12 years, and during that time he had been the subject of 5 formal complaints from Black and Latino residents. All 5 complaints described the same behavior: stops without probable cause, aggressive treatment, refusal to listen to explanations, and assumptions of guilt based on appearance. All 5 complaints had been documented, investigated, and dismissed with verbal warnings. The pattern had been ignored for over a decade. The investigation also revealed that Pierce had conducted 63 stops over the past 3 years that resulted in no citations, no arrests, and no enforcement action. Of those 63 stops, 58 involved people of color. The data showed a clear and undeniable pattern of racial profiling that the department had allowed to continue without consequences. Courtney Blake's background was investigated as well, and what came to light made her look even worse. Neighbors from her previous residence came forward with statements that Courtney had a history of calling the police on Black people for minor or non-existent reasons. She had called police on a Black delivery driver who was dropping off a package. She had called police on a Black family having a barbecue in a public park. She had called police on Black teenagers walking through her neighborhood, claiming they didn't belong there, even though they lived on the same street. The pattern was undeniable, and her 911 call about Khalil was just the latest example of behavior that had been going unchecked for years. The security footage from Solar Light was released to the media as part of the lawsuit, and within 48 hours the story had gone viral. The video showed Khalil being handcuffed and humiliated for a crime he didn't commit, and it showed Courtney Blake smirking in the background while Officer Pierce violated Khalil's rights. The public reaction was immediate and overwhelming. News outlets across the country picked up the story. The headlines were clear and damning. Black teen arrested for buying sneakers. Officer handcuffs teenager who showed receipt. Woman calls police on teen for legal purchase, faces $220,000 lawsuit. Courtney Blake and Officer Sean Pierce became the faces of racial profiling overnight, and their names were shared across every social media platform. The videos were watched millions of times, and the comment sections were filled with outrage. 3 weeks after the incident, Officer Sean Pierce was terminated. The official findings stated that he had demonstrated a documented pattern of racially biased policing, had violated department policies on constitutional stops, and had failed to conduct even basic verification before making an arrest. He was 41 years old with 12 years of law enforcement experience, and his career was over. Courtney Blake was arrested and charged with filing a false police report, a criminal offense that carried potential jail time. The civil lawsuit against her moved forward, and her attorney advised her that the evidence was so overwhelming that fighting the case in court would only make things worse. She had no choice but to settle. The civil lawsuit against Courtney Blake went to trial 6 months after the incident, and the evidence presented in court left no room for doubt about what had happened. The security footage from Sololite Boutique showed Khalil Garner making a legitimate purchase with a receipt that documented every detail of the transaction. The exterior camera footage showed Officer Sean Pierce arresting Khalil without conducting any investigation or asking to see the receipt that Khalil had tried multiple times to show him. The 911 call recording revealed Courtney's voice telling the dispatcher that Khalil had stolen the sneakers based on nothing more than the fact that she saw a black teenager with an expensive item she herself couldn't afford. Witness testimony from Ryan Mitchell confirmed that he had sold Khalil the sneakers, that the payment had been processed legally, and that Pierce had physically grabbed them and deleted video evidence when he tried to intervene. The jury heard all of this, watched the videos, and deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning a verdict in Khalil's favor. Courtney Blake was ordered to pay $220,000 in damages for filing a false police report, defamation, racial discrimination, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Courtney couldn't afford to pay the judgment. Her savings were depleted by legal fees, and the settlement forced her to declare bankruptcy. She lost her home, was forced to move out of state to escape the public attention, and her name became permanently unattached to the case as a warning about the consequences of racially motivated false reporting. Every news article, every legal analysis, and every discussion about the dangers of weaponizing 911 calls included her name and her mugshot. Officer Sean Pierce never worked in law enforcement again. After his termination, he applied to police departments in 3 neighboring counties. But every background check revealed the reason for his firing and the pattern of complaints that had been ignored for 12 years. No agency would hire him. He tried working private security, but when his employers discovered the viral videos and the national coverage of his role in Khalil's false arrest, they terminated his employment. He ended up working night shifts at a warehouse distribution center, and his 12-year law enforcement career became a cautionary tale used in police academies across the country to demonstrate how racial bias destroys careers and exposes departments to massive legal liability. The police department where Pierce had worked implemented comprehensive reforms as part of a settlement agreement with David Coleman and Khalil's family. All officers were required to complete mandatory training on constitutional policing and implicit bias. New protocols were established requiring officers to verify receipts and conduct basic investigations before making arrests in cases reported by third-party callers. An independent oversight committee was created to review all complaints of racial profiling, and officers with patterns of stops that resulted in no enforcement action were flagged for immediate review and potential termination. The reforms were credited with reducing racially disparate stops by 71% over the following 4 years. Khalil Garner used the settlement money to pay for his college education and enrolled in a business program with the goal of one day opening his own retail store where every customer would be treated with respect, regardless of their appearance. He became a vocal advocate for criminal justice reform and worked with David Coleman's foundation to educate young people about their rights when interacting with law enforcement. He gave interviews about his experience and used his story to encourage others to speak up when they witnessed injustice. David Coleman continued his work as a business owner and civil rights advocate, and he used Khalil's case as an example in community forums and training sessions about the real-world consequences of racial profiling. He funded scholarships for students like Khalil who had been impacted by discriminatory policing, and he worked with legislators to pass laws that created accountability for people who filed false 911 reports based on racial bias. 5 years after the incident, Khalil graduated from college with honors and was accepted into a graduate business program. Courtney Blake was still living out of state, her reputation destroyed and her finances in ruins. Officer Sean Pierce was still working warehouse jobs and couldn't escape the viral videos that followed him wherever he went. The reforms implemented by the police department remained in place, and complaints of racial profiling had decreased significantly. The case became a permanent reference point in discussions about the weaponization of 911 calls and the responsibility of law enforcement to verify information before making arrests. The security footage was used in classrooms, legal seminars, and police training sessions as evidence of how quickly assumptions based on race can escalate into false arrests and civil rights violations. The lesson was expensive, public, and permanent. Buying sneakers while black should never result in arrest. Calling the police based on jealousy and racial bias has consequences that include criminal charges and financial ruin. And officers who ignore evidence and make arrests based on skin color will lose their careers and cost their departments hundreds of thousands of dollars in settlements. Khalil never received an apology from Courtney Blake or Sean Pierce. But he received something far more valuable. Justice, accountability, and the knowledge that his willingness to fight back had created changes that would protect other young people from experiencing what he had endured. If you believe a teenager who saved for months to buy his birthday gift shouldn't be arrested for it, share this story. What reforms do you think would stop people from weaponizing 911 calls based on race? Drop your answer in the comments. And if this reminded you that working hard and succeeding while black shouldn't be treated as evidence of a crime, subscribe. We're not stopping until every person can buy what they've earned without being handcuffed for it.